Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hey, I'm just being myself. Ooh, Judi and I started to do our Sober Mind Rewind live stream on Tuesday. It was a train wreck. Okay. This morning, as you guys can see, I have a very special guest on. This is my good friend, Patrick. We're gonna talk about some history real quick, and then we're gonna do a little Q&A back and forth discussion about a topic which is very interesting to me. It's quite intriguing. I think it'll make for a good discussion. It's not something we hear or see often, and I think it's very, very brave and courageous for Patrick to share this. I'm looking forward to it. So on the Sober Mind Rewind that's scheduled, what I wanted to talk about during the abuse episode last week was a wickedly traumatic childhood event that I was talking to Patrick earlier, and I think it made a huge imprint on one of my development areas. So a teaser for it is on Easter Eve, 1983 or 84, my mother stood in the kitchen and slit her wrists in front of me, my brother, and my sister with a butcher knife, bled all over the place, screaming how much she wished we were never born. And the rest of the story is quite a tale. My very special guest, Patrick, welcome to Sober Mind. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I didn't know you were going to put me in the little box here. You know, I feel like I'm in the Brady Bunch. Hi, John.
Yeah. Hi.
It's just nestled in between.
We're gonna go to the live view, so we can see. Do you want me to move you? Make it bigger, Patrick?
No,
Okay.
You're good. You're plenty fine. This is your space. You do what you want.
All right. Thank you. So let me introduce Patrick a little bit. I've known Patrick for 5 years. I loosely knew him, very loosely. He was in sort of the same structure as me at work, and we always just said, "Hey, what's up?" in passing. Never really took it far beyond that. But you know what? As I was talking to you this morning, I realized I never once walked by Patrick and I went, "There's an alcoholic, for sure."
Well, it's not something you actually do, walking in. Oh, there's an alcoholic. Oh,
Yeah.
there's another one.
I don't think anyone ever did that to me. Maybe. I don't know. But, all right, Patrick, let's get into it. Let's just have a chill conversation. How about giving us a little bit of history? Who is Patrick?
Well, I'm still struggling with that one. So, in regards to alcohol, I grew up in the Midwest, I guess pretty standard thoroughfare in my case, parents divorced when I was around 10, went to college, had a normal college experience, but I played ice hockey growing up and, got into alcohol, a very similar story for a lot of others, like maybe at a wedding or two first when you're younger. And then when the social groups in high school, it became more frequent. And then college was like, I didn't consider my college experience any more or less different for alcohol. Of course, there was a fair amount in excess there, but that's where it really started ramping up. After my first year in school, my stepbrother passed away in a traffic accident on the night before my last final.
Oh man.
And
was it an alcohol related traffic accident or just
it was drug related. I was 19 at the time. He was 14 and he was riding with some older kids, and one of them the driver was high and crossed the center line, and the driver walked. My brother and another passenger died, and the other two were seriously injured.
Oh my gosh.
but there begins a lot of complications. You know, my parents told me the night before my last final, and all I wanted to do was just be with them. And processing emotions wasn't something that our family did healthily, I guess, or just it just wasn't talked about. So
Yeah.
I stayed, finished my final, and then we had to sit and debate because split families and everything like that. My brother was in Arizona at the time. I was in Lawrence. And so my stepdad decided just to fly him and my mom out for the funeral. And we had a small ceremony here, you know, like a week later. But I was also scheduled for, I damaged my knee in hockey. So I had uh, ACL replacement surgery scheduled, you know, for right when I ended classes. The
Oh, so
only,
all of this was happening all at the same time?
right.
Oh, geez.
So my first summer back, I mean, that's kind of where that's where the tide shifted, where I learned to drink. You know, I had a good year of excess drinking in college, you know, yay, party time. But then it became, for those that know me, I have a lot of inner monologue, and the alcohol inherently became a mute button.
Mm-hmm.
It ends up muting everything, as we all know, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what its appeal was to me. And so then began my, you know, uh, I guess different arc with alcohol. So, you know, I had roughly avoided a fair amount of trouble, had a couple brushes here and there, but nothing serious when I was younger. In fact, I got better when I was older, um, with it, of just like, you know, quote unquote, managing it. I never drank at work, never had any issues with it. Um, but, you know, would occasionally show up really hungover. You
Yeah.
know, it's just where you're just like just struggling through the day. You got the meat sweats and everything like that.
Yeah.
You know, coworker asks if you're trying to be healthy, drinking all that water, and you're like, no, I'm just trying to survive.
Yeah. Just trying to recover.
Right. Um, so I mean, it went on like that for a number of years, and then uh, I mean, then COVID happened, and like a lot of us, I mean, for me, I was like, all right, we're staying home. It's the end of the
Woohoo.
world. Might as well toast to that, right?
Yep. I think a lot of us did that. It was the COVID
And
drunk.
right, and so I mean, you know, we were doing Costco runs. You know, you'd buy for 2 weeks at a time since that is your only trip out of the house, and you'd come back with a car full of groceries, and of course there was a couple handles of whiskey, and I loved IPAs. I brew beer too, so
Oh
it
yeah.
was yeah, it's a lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it became an easy glove to slip into. You know, normally when I'd get home from work, I'd do some chores and then have a couple beers and then go hard on the weekends. But COVID, that time window shifted.
Yeah, you can go hard
Like
all
it,
the time.
you got in earlier, right?
Yeah.
And so I had always, you know, John, you shared your story about like the leading up to the sobriety point isn't just like you wake up one day and you're just like, oh, it's going to be sober. You know, it's a lot of struggle. You know, like I had a lot of. I remember sitting there, and my wife just loves to take pictures and videos of everything, and she was running through her, like, you know, her memories. You know, threw it up on the TV and was just running through a bunch of them. And I realized on a bunch of the videos for the weekends, like there's my kids doing stuff that kids do, you know, saying something silly. And then either dad's just on the couch, just like, you know, recovering. And I realized I had inherently missing a lot of it, or at least, you know, I thought I was there, but I wasn't present.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that became a driving factor for me. And, you know, I struggled so hard with this idea of there's this question, am I an alcoholic? Because in my mind, I had this like rosy cheek, brown bag, sleeping on a bench, or somebody who has a lot of, trauma or issues, or, some issues that I have to like validate being, like, this is why I'm an alcoholic. And, I drink during, like, I thought it would be like, well, I'm not drinking at work. I call it a downward spiral comparison, saying like, there's always somebody worse than me, so I'm not an alcoholic.
Yeah. As someone else told me, it's a functional alcoholic. You're still going to work, you're still doing your things, you're functioning, but you're still an alcoholic.
Right.
Yeah, and I heard, I think we're all familiar with Dr. Drew. If you're not, used to be a TV celebrity, but he always used to say something that helped me drink a lot, which was, he's like, no matter what you do, if it's in moderation, which is such a loose term.
That's so open.
Because he said, unless it's affecting your profession or your family, then you're probably moderating. I'm like, sweet. I'm going full steam ahead until something gets
Free
messed
ticket.
up. But that's not really the
It's
reality
not
of it.
the case. So I stopped. At a certain point, I stopped asking myself, am I an alcoholic? And the question, thankfully, I was digesting enough, either quit lit and stuff like that,
What's that?
the question, quitting literature, stuff like, what is that?
Like Alan Carr's book.
Alan Carr, William Porter, Annie Grace. Yeah, all great. Or, they speak to the behavior mechanics of what alcohol does to you. And it helped me wrap my mind around that. But the question ended up becoming, is alcohol keeping me from what I want to do in life? And the answer was yes. And I didn't have to worry about if I define myself, because then the answer became clear of what I need to do, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what my relationship is with it. Is it a full-blown alcoholic, or is it, whatever? The answer is, it's just impeding me for what I want to do. So
that's very similar to our, I don't want to use a fancy word, but sort of the catalyst of when I think you and I started to really realize, man, we can't meet our friends on Saturday morning. There's just no way, because we're going to be hungover.
Yeah. We realized how much it was impeding on our own wanting to go do things, because we wouldn't plan stuff for Sunday morning, period.
No.
Because we just weren't going to be available.
And Patrick, I don't have young children, obviously, but man, that's got to be a tough one to navigate too, because when I'm hungover, the last thing I want to do is interact with another human being.
Yeah.
Let alone try to nurture and help the seeds grow.
So I have a question. How long have you been sober?
I have been sober about 30 months now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. John, you don't know this. My wedding anniversary is September 5th. My sober anniversary is September 6th.
Oh, wow.
My wife and I went out during COVID, and it was like, that fall where we finally got to start going out a little bit and, masked up. But we finally had like a reprieve, and like time for just me and her is far and few between, because we're co-parenting all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we got a day of just us and the kids with the grandparents, and it was an outdoor event. We were down in the West Bottoms, enjoying the flea market. It was a wonderful day. It was amazing, like, great sun, great temperature, and of course they have alcohol there all throughout the day. And it ended up being a long day, and I just remember vaguely being like, that was in my heart, it was one of the best days with my wife. Because, I got to be with her and we got to celebrate. But when I tried to recall everything from it, it was like somebody pressed their thumb against my hard drive and smeared everything. Or like I woke up, because you wake up in the haze and you start to do your piecemeal thing, right? You're like, did I do this? And then you're wasting time reconstructing your memory. And there was just nothing there. And I was so upset that I robbed myself from that.
Yeah. So that was the catalyst that started you on your journey.
That was one. And then I was like, I'll just try it for a month. Because if you tell a person who's drinking, you know, you're going to do it forever on day one, it's a little daunting task.
Yeah. I want to back up real quick and give some history about, because I started the discussion about saying how I vaguely knew Patrick and passed him in the hallways once in a while. But Judi and I were discussing this morning about how ever since we went down our sobriety journey, about how things have just started to happen and everything's a lot easier. Maybe that's just our brains going, hey, there, mofo, check it out. You can actually be a human being and get shit done.
Yeah.
But like getting this whole stream and the podcast going, it just seems like maybe in the past, maybe that's because I was in a perpetual hangover state, that things were difficult to do. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed things, but it seemed like there was always a challenge with something. It seems like a lot of those hurdles have been removed. So for anybody out there that's struggling with addiction or alcoholism, when you get your old self back, you'd be surprised how efficient you become. So I was outside one day, and Patrick, I was doing something, I can't remember. Patrick walked by, and I was like, hey, Patrick, I kind of forgot your name. I hadn't seen you in so long. And you're like, hey, John. So we started just chit-chatting, and you told me that you lived up the road. Oh, because you offered to help me do something because we were doing yard work or whatever. I was like, I could always use a hand doing some maintenance around the house. And as Patrick started walking away, this is, Ed, you and I were talking about this, about how men don't know how to ask each other out on friend dates. It's very awkward. So as Patrick was walking away, I was like, hey, if you want, because I wanted to hang out with him, but I didn't know what to do. So I was like, hey,
awkward.
Hey, Patrick, if you want, I don't go fishing or anything like that, but I can. I have, I don't know. And then I just spit it out. I'm like, I don't drink beer. I've been sober. I think at that time it was like 8 months or something like that. Because Patrick, he looked at me, goes, oh man. It was like the doors open. He's like, I've been sober 18 months. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing for you. But we had a quick discussion, and I walked away from it feeling super rejuvenated, because he was the first person that I ran into that I didn't know was an alcoholic or had any other problems. Welcome to the world, everyone. We all got problems. Right. We all just cruise around masking them somehow. Hey, heads up, those people you see on Facebook aren't really what's there. Well, some are. Emily and Sarah are. But after that, I have found that when you talk about mental health issues or internal struggles with people, that we have an instant connection. It's really difficult to describe unless you go through it. When I was talking to Ed about mental health and my struggles, we went and had a quick lunch, and it just like, it's like we've been friends for 30 years and just are catching up on stuff.
Well, it's nice to feel that you're not alone. There's other people out there that are going through the same shite that you're going through. So yeah. Yeah,
we wanted to share it real quick. So Patrick's like, that's all right. There's a lot to unpack there, as we just started like vomiting to each other. So we set up a date, and I think we went out we went and had coffee. Yeah, it's a legit date. And we chatted, and then after that...
Bro date? Is that what that's called?
Yeah.
Okay.
Man date. After that, we started...
We're not kids anymore. I can't like run up to the doorbell and be like, hey, can John come out to play?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So Patrick now, I pick him up for a 5K run once in a while, traditionally Thursdays, and those are some of the most mentally productive runs that we do, because we just talk about mental health and what's going on. That's what led to this. So Patrick has got a situation. It's not a situation. It is, I don't know what the adjective is. He's a recovering alcoholic who lives with, I got to figure out what these people are called. I call it
Normies.
Yeah, normal.
Yeah.
I call it.
I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
I call it the Sarah. That'll be our code word anymore. The Sarah is a person that can occasionally have a drink. Mystifies me. I don't know what this is about.
Yeah, they can have one and then not have any more, and they're just fine.
Yeah, I can't imagine getting drunk on a Saturday afternoon and then stopping.
No. No.
I was imagining I would explode. Got to keep feeding the fire. But his wife is one of those people that can have a drink. I don't want to put any words in Patrick's mouth, so I'm just going to let him take it away. The last discussion we had that I thought was, I said, Patrick, you are a super amazing human being and very strong dealing with what you're dealing with. And the comment from Patrick was, man, sometimes I feel like I'm just hanging on by a thread, and that really caught me off guard. So we chatted after the run, and I asked if he'd be comfortable talking about his adventure at home with his children and how he navigates. So Patrick, how do you navigate? Give us a little bit of history about the alcohol relationship with a sober person while you're recovering.
Yeah, so my wife's habits, normie is there. I think the AA groups have other names for them, but I mean, not only is it she can have one drink and stop, there have been many nights where she'll pour herself a glass of wine and take a sip and then forget about it. What? Like, that is just like, and like I wake up the next day and the glass is like there on the counter, and that is just like mind blowing to me, because I'm like, no fallen soldiers, or no, we called them cheerleader beers in college, right? You don't leave no man behind. Like, it was just so unfathomable to me, there is no frequency for her, like for me, it was like, Friday and Saturday nights, easily going, if there's an opportunity to drink, I was taking it, and then she can take it or leave it, it wasn't that big of a thing. And so, like, that was always such a bizarre thing to me, and didn't really enter my mind into the equation, because in my world, when I was drinking, drinkers suffer from drinking thinking. Like, I was always doing the calculus of, I can have X many drinks before I get too drunk, or I can start drinking at this time, or like, I called it, find the decoy at the party, meaning, find the person who's getting the drunkest and just don't get as drunk as them, right? Like some sort of weird freaking calculus that, you could always just be cramming drinks in. And so I never took her drinking into the equation. And so that's like so I never had like a quote unquote foil or mirror to look at, like I thought I was broken when I was struggling with alcohol, to the point, because my wife can do it. And it was almost to the point of the conversations like, well, you just need to moderate. And it was just a constant reminder of, I must be broken because I fail at moderating. I can't do this.
Yeah. And
so when, in fact, I didn't even talk to her quite a bit about the drinking thing when I first stopped, because it was just like, after our anniversary, I was just like, I want to do a healthy thing, right? I'm just going to dry out for a month, because we've done a couple stretch of those here and there. And I think those are a good, sober, curious first entry into the foray, because you can white knuckle the first month, right? And by white knuckle, I mean like just grin and bear it. And
it's not so fearful either, because you've got that destination at the end. You've got just that 30 days, and then I can have a whatever you bargain with yourself to have, right? And it's not that fearful, I'm never going to drink again.
And then, so I kind of just danced around it. Month 2 was an extended, oh, hey, I'm keeping a good thing going, I'm not going to drink. And then about 45 days in, so I hit my pink cloud. For those who are unaware of pink cloud, there's not everybody gets it, but there's a point after you kind of white knuckle through sobriety, and your mileage may vary, but you feel like you're firing on all cylinders. Everything's happening, you're making all the right choices. Your outcomes are aligning with your decision of the process. But what ultimately came is you cannot white knuckle everything, and you can't ride that pink cloud forever. And so invariably you get these itches and urges. AA calls them the fuckets, where you're put. It is so amazing how behavior driven, there'll be one thing. I was like cleaning in the kitchen, and my wife did something that, like, she put the coffee pot in wrong or whatever, and I'm just like, rage, something that immediately snaps you for a behavior, and then all of a sudden comes cascading like all these feelings, and you don't know how to process it. And I'm like, I need a drink. Yeah, babe, I need, but I would often catch myself. A great toolkit for me to start was HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Take a quick breath, figure out if you're either one of those, and try and give yourself some space.
That's a good one.
So I'm getting to the point, like, that was working, but there came about, like I said, 45 to 60 days in. That's a lot to emotionally go through. When you're going through HALT, you're trying to give yourself space. It's not like you're like a Zen master, like, oh, I'm getting in a better place. Sometime I'm like outside cramming leaves in a bag going, son of a, like just working it out. And she's just like, well, babe, you're angry. You just need a drink.
Oh, yeah, that's a hard one.
And it, and those kept on just popping up a little bit more frequently. Babe, you just need to relax. And then came the one that kind of really stung, and that was like, you're not as much fun as you used to be. Oh. And it was really confusing for me because I wanted to be like, I'm doing this to better myself, but the reality was I didn't know how to live with myself for like 20 years. The mute button went on for so long that I was so worried about putting up the veil during every interaction that I didn't know how to reconcile being myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like
all that stuff that you were suppressing for so many years just coming back just like a flood.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's what I remember when I was... That's the strength that I'm talking about, that I admire from Patrick, because I know there's no way I could have done that. I just can't. I need a much more robust support system. And if you were a Sarah or a normie, I don't
muggle.
if you didn't give me the 100% support, it would become a huge issue. It really would. I know myself 100% because I need to be on the same sheet of music
as your partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's why you and I going into this together was the best decision we could have done. I'd love to get into a conversation with someone out there that are in a codependent alcoholic relationship. One quit and one is still a hard drinker. That'd be rough.
That would be rough.
Patrick, I want to back up a little bit. So the support system is something we're going to talk about in a bit with your wife. Not with her, about your wife. But so during all of that time, you had a distinct problem, but there was never any acknowledgement from, two-part question, from your wife saying, hey, you might want to tone it down? Or was that when she would say you need to moderate? Or did you ever have any friends or other family say, hey man, looks like you're getting a little bit out of control? We know those stories.
No, the hockey friends, when I would do it in my 20s and early 30s, it was almost like fuel to the fire. Like, oh, this is going to be a great story tomorrow. Just feed them some more.
Yeah.
Right. Because when I drank, it was interesting looking back at the behavior now. The most endorphins that you hit is right before the drink, right? Not so. I was always chasing that, and so I would power. I'd call it time traveling. I only figured out how to go forward though. Like I would just keep drinking, and well into blackout. Like so, my blackout periods could go several hours, unfortunately, and
you can do a lot of damage in that time.
Yeah, like I just didn't want to stop. But the hockey crew, thought it was good story times. As long as it's like, as long as he's not seriously hurting himself, it's just mischievous at this point, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, we know there's so many gray areas. Driving when you shouldn't have and arriving okay, or incidents where I'm just speaking wrongly or whatever, and there are other friends that could help amend the situation, or just basically gray areas that I had gotten away with for so long.
There's been many a times that you and I have driven home that we don't even know how we got home. We'd wake up the next morning going, how did we? I don't even remember the trip home at all.
Plus, to your guys' other conversation, if calling me out was needed, then that meant others had to reflect on their own sobriety.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then also with the normies, my wife was just like, you're just failing to moderate. You just don't know how to do it. Maybe you should practice more. Right? I was like, oh, I can practice all the time.
Yeah.
That is interesting. It really is. There's just a ton to unpack there.
It's definitely an interesting dynamic. I don't know how, because you and I were both so in our addiction and we both came out of it at the same time. We had a support system. Did you ever have a support system other than your wife around you?
Yeah, real quick, Patrick. So Michelle is asking, does Patrick go to AA? He is using the language. Good question, Michelle. Patrick and I have discussed this. And I just want to be clear, because I made a comment in another episode about how AA was not for Judi and I. I just want to be clear that it is a fantastic organization along with Al-Anon. That's why I have the links up here. It's not just like everything. It's not meant for everybody. And when you go into some of these things, we really embraced it in the beginning, but we started to feel that where we were at with our sobriety journey, that the timing for AA was not good timing. Anyway, yeah. Patrick,
yeah, I can do that. I can do both those with one answer, so I can dovetail that together. So I didn't have a support system, and I thought I was broken, or I was really grasping at straws, and I was confused. No matter how many books I read or podcasts I listened to, that you need that connection with somebody. And AA, I went through the big book, and the big book taught me my most important lesson about sobriety. Take what you need and leave the rest. Like, I realized AA wasn't for me as well, but that doesn't mean everything in there is bad, right? And so it works for a lot of people, and like you said, John, I think kudos to those that go for it. But I had some issues with the higher power thing, and I can get to that here in a minute. And then the other way of the core issue that I have is the way they frame as a victim, because if I'm a victim of alcoholism and it's out of my control, I always approach my relationship with alcohol in a defensive posture. And while defensive posture is important, I think a better approach is a higher awareness and not treating it with a negative emotion.
Yeah.
Because if you let the negative dialogue spin out of control, then that can cause just as much damage.
Yeah.
To that point, I do know I needed help. And the hardest part of asking for help, do you guys know what that is?
Admitting you have a problem? That would be mine.
Yeah, a lot of people would say being vulnerable to ask the question.
Yeah, that would be mine, yeah.
The answer is receiving the help. like letting yourself be helped.
Oh, being open to receive the help.
Because somebody's going to do it in a way that you're not comfortable with, right? Or they're going to do it differently.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing a life coach. This guy does a lot of podcasting around it. He ran a community called Share. Sharing Helps All in Recovery. He went through AA and NA. His name's Omar Pinto. And it was one of the best experiences of my life, and it really helped tune a lot of stuff. But the point was, if I didn't have that support system here, if you can't do it yourself, you go shopping.
Yeah.
You go shopping is like either you go to AA, you go to therapy. Like there's tools out there, whatever you're questioning yourself on. Again, I was like, what? Should I do a life coach? Should I spend this money on it? And I sat back and I realized, like, we'd spend all this money on other stuff, and you're questioning whether or not you're wanting to invest money in yourself.
Yeah. Well, you spent enough money on beer and alcohol, that's for sure.
Right?
Yeah, you'd never second guess yourself when you're down to your last $100. Be like, I need 2 cases of Busch and some cheeseburgers.
I mean,
we've done that.
So here comes the point of the sobriety where the work happens. And this is the part where you and I know we connect, because you can white knuckle. AA calls them dry drunks.
Yeah.
You go through and you just stay sober. The object is not to stay sober. The object is to build a life worth living.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Most definitely.
So that dialogue is funny. Like, why? Let's unpack that. Why I didn't want to spend money on me, right? Because I call it my inner critic, always has something to say. The imposter syndrome is somebody wants to talk about. This is why I can't take compliments. I'll always admonish or deflect or have some sardonic humor. The fact is, I grew up and I didn't have enough dialogue to know how to self-parent myself, self-care, self-love. I didn't have the tools to recognize, hey, you know what? You're a pretty all right dude, and you might need some help here, and it's worth doing this, and that's okay.
Did you have any of that support from your parents? Were they nurturing?
My mom
like that?
My mom was loving. I love my parents, and I still have I have a good relationship with my mom. Okay, with my dad, but they're very repressed emotionally. And whenever I did something, it was always a way to get better. Oh, you mowed the lawn. Oh, but you could do this. And thank you, but.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, but. And it was, this was the hardest part of learning of the work is, that is neither a good or a bad thing. What I'm trying to say is that type of dialogue gave me a drive to always better myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was always looking to improve. But at the other side, I was always looking for my validation from somebody else. I didn't learn how to do it myself. If I could do this task perfect enough, then maybe I could be loved, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I was a kid. I held that wrongly, and that was my arrested development for 20 years in my adulthood, was like I didn't know how to validate myself. But that gave me my drive. I went after certifications, no matter how much I was still struggling with alcohol, like I still wanted to perform well. And I, went from being a Zamboni driver to an event manager to, going through AV to project management to where I'm now, which I am very grateful for, being a SME in my area. That was part of my drive, but at the same time, that's that inner dialogue of, complete a task and, well, next time it can be better, and then all of a sudden becomes this like inner critic that is just constantly chirping you.
Yes, constantly pecking at the back of your head. It's how I always visited my inner critics. Always pecking at the back of my head, going, no, you didn't do that right. You can do it. Yeah.
Yep. And so that was the hardest thing about help is like, are you sure you need help? You're just moderating wrong. You're just not doing it well enough. You're not giving enough effort. You're not, and at some point it's like admitting failure and knowing that I love myself enough to like ask for that help. I don't have the communication with my wife, so maybe I could have somebody help provide insight. And so after that coaching, my wife and I did therapy together and, opened up a lot of lines of communication. Yes, we're always going through work, but there was a lot that I had to grow through to understand that. And I think that was important on that sobriety journey. And at the core of that is self-validation and self-parenting, learning how to reparent yourself. And I don't mean be a parent where your parents failed, because everybody is going to fail at being a parent. Everyone is. At a certain point, we have to learn to be that validation for ourselves.
Very much so.
If I am my own worst critic, what happens if I am my best cheerleader?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we can do a lot. Patrick, Judi rocked the questions out of the park. You've answered like 80% of them without us even asking. But here are the fun ones. What's the drunkest you've ever been that you can remember?
Oh, man. I'm trying to think of there's a few. Well, there was one where I crashed the local minor league Christmas party, and I ended up chirping to the enforcer on the team. This is after they filled an arena and everything like that. I was just the event manager, still playing men's league hockey, and he was a great player, but he was always like throwing fists, and he threw a cheap shot one night, and I was like, man, I love watching you play, but that was a pretty nasty cheap shot. And kind of got in his ear, and then I realized that I had to have a couple, I was so naive about it. I thought I was, again, growing up with I call them you can do the backhanded compliments, right? That's an easy dialogue for me. And so I was unaware that I was getting under this guy's skin pretty easy. So I had to be escorted out of that one. And then also there was numerous videos of just, probably of me, attempting to dance, but it was probably documenting to make sure I wasn't having a seizure or anything like that.
So
good times.
And then, it doesn't end there. So they went to a winery afterwards, met back up with the group, and I had some escorts, and I was way out in a field, and I recognized the street name at the end of the night, and it was like one of those ones where I just pulled a disappearing act and thought I could walk home. Ended up just like destroying my glasses, left my phone in a field. I got picked up by the sheriff and escorted home by the sheriff. And I vaguely remember sitting in the car, they got my address out of me. I just moved in with my now wife. And they had to ring the doorbell and be like, does so-and-so live here? And this is after me moving in a couple months. And she's like, yeah. But before that, I was sitting in the car, apparently I was just sitting there going like, oh my God, my girlfriend's going to kill me. Don't send me in there, officer. This is awful. Just drive me to the station. And so like, she had to come out and like talk me in. And like, it was like, yeah, it was, the next day I had to use the Find My iPhone app to go find my phone in a field. The next morning anxiety, shame trip is even more so when you've destroyed a lot of stuff. And,
But let me guess, that wasn't your bottom.
I, the bottom is when you stop digging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I lamented on this. I've had many. You're right, John. I've had many lower points where I just wallow in the shame. But the bottom was that anniversary, and it wasn't. And I have to admit this now because I felt so angry that I felt so robbed of something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt that wounded me more than some of the more deep shame trips.
Yeah.
Have you been able to process some of that stuff and move beyond that?
Yeah. Like the talk therapy helps, the coaching has helped.
Mm-hmm.
Learning my behaviors helped a lot. During some of the coaching, there's a wonderful series around called the Drama Triangle. If you're ever on YouTube, it speaks to codependency behaviors, to recognize stuff like that. We often speak of, it's not like you go through therapy and then you're like, here's a clean bill of health, right? It's just they give you a new toolkit to deal with some of your, we mentioned this before this interview, but there's a physician called Gabor Mate, and he speaks of trauma, and it's not like a one-time event necessarily for some people that alters your course in life. Trauma is at some point you disconnect from your emotions and you're unable to process them. And it becomes, behavioral. You have triggers and you have inability to cope. So you get stuck in stages trying to cope with your inability to process.
Yeah, definitely.
So so processing that isn't just saying like, I'm going to go out and chop a tree and process my anger. It's going to be okay. You have to learn what either triggers you or sends you down that path, and you begin to learn to read cues before stuff like that happens, right? You can understand it. And then, like it didn't make sense to me at first. John, I love running because it was one of those things that, like, at first it was an escape to, like, I need to clear my head, I need to get out and run. But then it becomes almost behavioral, as in, like, I feel weird. I'm almost getting these similar itches to, like, I need a drink, to, like, if I've been running enough, there needs to be a time where, like, I need to run, like, to help process certain things.
Yeah. I want to go back a little bit. What you were just saying there was the relearning of stuff. I think I was talking to you about this. I'm just now, within the last month or so, starting to get to that stage from an overall mental health perspective. And I think the I would call it end of this month, going to be 18 months, year and a half of sobriety. So I think a lot of the healing and unpacking, I've started to learn, not intentionally. I think it's behavioral stuff. I'm talking in a weird circle here. People that are investigating getting sober need to understand that all of this stuff that we're talking about doesn't just happen. You can't just go, I quit drinking a month ago. It's also compounded by how long you've been engaged in this behavior. My brain got reshaped by this. Back to what Patrick was saying about, that endorphin of cracking open a beer. For me, it was like the Friday nights of driving home and stuff like that. Your brain, my psychiatrist confirmed this, that your brain's like, oh man, I'm going to start rewarding myself. Now you start to feel happy when you're just thinking about, oh man, I'm going to drink, and there's this whole ritual involved with it, and then you get drunk, and then there's just this whole thing. So having to retrain your brain to not be bored not drinking and to get simple pleasure, it just takes time. I don't know how to speed it up. I'm sure there's doctors out there that could talk about the psychology of it, but I think it's just when you're sober, your brain exercises itself in a different way. And you start to get those things. I got done with my run the other day, and I was walking, and I was like, man, I'm really happy. Then I was like, oh shit, I'm happy. I don't need.
And I didn't drink a beer. Yay.
I feel I think this is where, where I'm starting to go. Going back to, I don't know, 15, 16 months ago, it was in the summertime. We were building the shed.
Oh, yeah.
And Patrick, I was out there. And those were those reward moments too. First of all, I would have drank a 12-pack while I was out there cutting lumber and stuff. But I got done, I was hot and sweaty, and I came up, and I was going to go take a shower, and I had a wildly unbelievable craving to crack open a beer, because I would chug that bad boy, and then take one into the shower with me.
Shower beer.
And I had to tell Judi, and it was a little embarrassing, because I just had to let it out, and that's when I learned I got a real good support system. As I said, babe, I really am craving a beer, and she goes, have a seltzer water. And I cracked open that seltzer water and chugged it, and I got borderline that same endorphin release. So your brain's like, oh, you gave me my reward.
Well,
I didn't. I kind of tricked you.
Yeah, it's the whole ritual. You crack it open, you hear that, tsh, and then you get the seltzer, the carbonation in your mouth. So it's a whole. You're tricking yourself basically. But I think once you change those behavioral patterns that you've been doing for so long, once you start changing them and start doing those in a repetitive motion, like you were doing your other behavior patterns in a repetitive motion, then your brain's like, oh, okay, you want to do this now. This is what we're doing. Okay, this I can finally get into this routine and forget the old routine.
Yeah. There is no grand event that's going to make you sober. There's a series of repetitive behaviors that you have to cultivate. I'm not going to say enforce or, drive yourself towards, but you have to put them up in a positive situation. And I call that you talk about, I've had several of those. I call them itches. They're the reflex stuff. Oh, I got done with X. I need a beer or whatever. The hardest one for me was not when I was angry, because anger, I'm like the Hulk, I guess that's my secret. I'm angry all the time. I learned that was my safeguard for my other emotions. Like that was my, anger was the one shepherding what I was really feeling inside. So I had to recognize, hey, you're angry. Why are you angry? What are you trying to protect? Mm-hmm. And I learned that one quick. The hardest one is a Friday out of the blue. The weather's nice. I didn't do anything in particular. And then it would just come and it would swell. And I'm like, I need a drink, and not just a refresher, not like a reflex. And I've reflected back, and you speak to relearning. I realized that some of my more drunk escapades or more indulgent stuff where the drive was hard was when I was the happiest or stuff was going well. Mm-hmm. And this is where I had to learn about foreboding joy. And this is when we are even more behavioral driven than you think. Are you familiar with the term of what foreboding joy is?
No. Let's hear it.
This is what the impersonator and how deep they can run. So what do you think a critic would say if you are on a hot streak?
He's on fire.
You can do better.
Oh, critic.
You're doing good, but you can do better.
Yeah.
Or it's going to end. You know what? It's going to end at some point. You may be hot shit right now.
This isn't going to last.
But this isn't going to last. But the thing is, your mind knows that this too shall pass, right? Mm-hmm. Even for the good stuff.
Yep.
I can't be 100% of the time. Yep, so these are where the self-destructive tendencies come in. This is why I can't have nice things. Oh, everything's going great for me at work. I'm going to celebrate, and then I either have some tardiness or whatever the next week, or things are going great with my wife, and then I drink and then say something stupid. Or the point is, foreboding joy is the fact that your body, your doubter is so strong to say, look, this isn't going to last. So let's end it on our terms. You know what? I'm not going to let it run its course. I'm going to F it up right now. And that is it. And what I mean by processing stuff is even the good emotions Being thankful to be happy is recognizing that it doesn't last forever. Being thankful for the present moment and knowing that even though that they may be sadder times ahead, you are grateful for what has unfolded in front of you to give you the moment now.
Yeah, living in the moment. That's another difficult thing
Right.
for some people, is to live in the moment instead of, as my sister calls it, future stressing. To stress about things in the future that haven't really happened, or to stress about, your good mood or your joy, cresting over and plummeting down into your despair. Yeah.
It takes so much practice. It takes practice and time.
But I think also you have to tell yourself it's gonna be okay. Even if you do fall down into that pit, it's still gonna be okay. You're gonna survive through what is coming.
And that's what I mean by reparenting. And it literally, in some meditative senses, it's letting that critic say, like, you're going to fail, you're going to suck. And it's like going, you know what? I will fail and it's not going to be perfect. But, I will have given it a shot by showing my true self.
Mm-hmm.
My family loves me. I love me, And you know what? You walk up to that impersonator in your mind and you give that person him a hug. You know? And it is so hard to say. It's so hard to say, thank you for being concerned enough that I may get hurt again.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being there.
Yes.
And trying to give a positive, like, you are an advocate for me surviving, and you have led me a long way. But you're not the only one who gets to speak for me. So I appreciate you contributing to the conversation, and we'll take note. Yes, we will get hurt.
Yeah.
Do you say all that out loud in public?
Walking down the street.
Not out loud. You mumble it, right? The mumbler.
Yeah.
I need to make a correction. My sister says future tripping, not future stressing.
Yeah. Real quick, Ed has a question. While you look for this, Patrick, I'm going to make a statement before I forget. Ed is looking for the link to the drama triangle. He says YouTube series. There's a lot of results out there, so if you could check that out. But going to what Patrick said about the behaviors and how I said it's the practice and everything. I realized that. Remember the other night when I said, "Man, sobriety has really become my hobby." It's something I'm so into. I know this is something you shouldn't say, but Judi and I are such doom and gloom about ever drinking again that if we ever do, we'll have our first drink on the Sober Mind podcast. And
I had trouble eating rum-soaked raisins because they were soaked in rum. I was like, no, I can't. I don't want those.
Yeah, I think that's to take this in the spirit for which it's intended. There's a benefit of having drank so long that once you get sober, you're like, this is way better.
Yeah.
And surrounding ourselves in communities and projects like this, it is a vastly powerful tool. I didn't realize. Here we are talking about sobriety and mental health with like-minded people and being able to share this out there with other folks that are like, oh man, there's a whole other community out there that has all these problems, a lot of problems, and that's what helps a lot.
Here's another mind-blowing point: is we create our realities, whether we like to or not. If we are in a defensive posture all the time and don't know how to parent ourselves and give ourselves compassion, you're going to surround yourself with coping mechanisms like alcohol or ill behaviors or codependency, and it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You are going to find yourself, if you're going to worry about yourself being the victim all the time, you're going to find yourself putting yourself in that space all the time.
Yeah.
If you're going to be an aggressor or persecutor, or for me, I want to speak to the drama triangle at another time if you'd let me, but there's another role called, the rescuer, somebody who prides the martyr. Let me do this for you. Let me do this for you. Let me do this. You put everybody else's needs first. But the point is, whatever you identify with, you will constantly, self-confirmation bias, bring all that around you.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call this, karma or your aura. There's different languages to what people try to describe this as.
Yeah.
But life will continue to give you tests until you're willing to pass the one that is presented to you. Likewise with sobriety, if you're looking to make yourself sober, this is the behavior that helps. Community, knowledge, and other items that you can start bringing in around you. If and sometimes that's a hard truth to recognize. If we create our own realities and we let people that are either poisonous or speak ill or not in line with what we want to identify with, there will always be conflict there.
Yeah.
So we will always struggle to know that truth.
I do agree with you on that point, that you attract what's going on inside of you is a lot of what you're going to attract in your environment. If you're going through like the sobriety, like we're going through our sobriety and you're going through your sobriety, it's you start to attract other people that are either like-minded or going through the same kind of struggle that you're going to go through. Not all the time, but I find for me that's what works for me. If I start to change my mind thought inside, then it starts to reflect on the outside.
Right. And that is something that's really, really difficult to recognize too, though, because at the heart of it, I know this is going to get very philosophical, but we're all cavemen. We all like to hang around our tribe.
I'm a cave woman. Thank you.
Yeah. Touche. We, when we were young teenagers, we'd hang around smoking pot with our pot smoking buddies who happened to be inherently depressed and listening to The Cure and the Smiths and Depeche Mode. And so we're all just sitting there in that depressed circle. That exact same behavior spreads into our adult lives. We just got done doing it 2 years ago, with our barbecuing, homebrew folks. When you think back on it, like the happiest people that ever came to those events that weren't sitting there like this with this weird, like me brewing beer and bloated and inflamed and sweating, was I would look around and there's pictures. It'd be like Sarah was there, and Emily was there. It's like, why are they so happy? They're not alcoholics. They're just there having a couple drinks. They're not like on a 6-day bender.
Yeah. They're not drinking to deal with their hangover.
Yeah. So how I said that in a roundabout way was, I know it sounds, I will always say cliche things because I think the cliche things are the truth sometimes. But if you surround yourself with good people, then you're just going to be a good people.
Well, here's the hard truth, if we affect our surroundings that much, there's going to be some people who say like, no, it's just, you don't choose your disposition or your environment or whatever. For the people that say that, I think the hardest thing to look inward is that's the self-doubter saying, no, you can't, you're going to fail.
Yep.
Right. Or if you're doing it wrong. Right? To recognize, to give yourself enough self-love that you have the power to take care of yourself in that environment. Not everybody has those tools. And it sounds, granola crunchy or huggy or religious to say like you have the power within yourself. Yeah, right? Yeah. But that is the honest truth. You create your own reality. You have chosen, we can delve into like events that happened to you or whatever, but Buddha said, we do not react to events and people. We react to our perception of events and people.
Correct. Yep.
So it is really a very, and that's scary to understand that like your success or happiness in life is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
There's another caveat too that a lot of us addicts or alcoholics deal with. Excuse me. Is that I catch myself. Patrick said it in a different way earlier, but there's a lot of that. The other day when I was walking after my run and I said, "Oh, I'm happy. Oh, holy shit, I'm happy." The immediate other inner observer that's sitting like 2 feet away inside your head goes, "Don't worry, bud. The shit's gonna end real soon. Your happiness isn't gonna be around, so
enjoy it for now."
Yeah, like Patrick was saying, you might as well start fucking it up now because it ain't gonna last a week. And I don't want to sound funny about that, but it's true. That's especially with the trauma that a lot of us have gone through, especially with my non-self validation and adult self-esteem issues. It's really tough to stop, like Patrick said, and go, man, you're loved. You're a good person. Give yourself some credit. Give yourself permission to have a good life. Give yourself permission to be creative. Give yourself permission to have these good friends and express yourself and granola love one another. You know?
Yeah, we judge ourselves off of our intentions and others off of actions, meaning like think about when you let those inner critics go off on those echo chambers. We build it up in our heads so much, and sometimes it just needs the light of day to understand how absurd it is. You know, if I were to come up and be like, "John, I was such a piece of shit. I left the toilet seat up," and you're, you know, like, you'd be like, what are you talking about? Yeah, it's you errantly. I know you love your wife, and you will do the best that you can, you know, to create a good environment around you and her. And it's not like, oh my God, that one instance, you know, basically you have to bring stuff. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? You have to just kind of sometimes, again, process this stuff and realize how absurd that inner critic is. Instead of just trying to lock them away, be like, all right, asshole, have the floor. Tell me what's wrong with this. And then you can be like, you know what? I appreciate the share, but you're patently absurd.
Yeah.
Thank you, and move on.
Yep.
Again, for me, man, it takes so much practice. So much practice.
It does. It's a constant battle sometimes.
Yep.
Patrick, sorry, go ahead. I'm going to ask you a question. It's not loaded or anything, but it's something I continue to work on because I think you asked me during the last one. Patrick, do you have any advice for someone that's thinking about trying to get sober? Before you answer that, mine is, I used to have the answer for it, but the longer I get into this, I'll be like, fuck, dude, I don't know. You got to find your own path.
Well, that's pretty true. Everybody has their own path to sobriety. I mean, it's not a quick fix for everybody. Like just like AA is not a quick fix for everybody. Just like books are not a quick fix for everybody. It's just everybody has to find what's gonna set off that light bulb above their head, going, aha, that makes perfect sense now.
Yeah. Sorry, Patrick, your advice.
I know that mind very well. I've talked with a lot of those people. You know, you talked about laying in bed weeping. You know, when you were going through, mine was very similar, just destroying myself over and over, asking, am I a worthwhile human being? And to those people with the advice, you know, I don't like you say you have to find your own path. Mine, though, is, you know, this is where that sardonic humor comes in, John, you know, because my response was almost identical at first. But now I've crafted that too. I see you, I love you, and I appreciate the awareness that you're trying to bring for this. You have the answers, and you will find your way.
That's a good one.
Because I can't walk that path for them. I can't download my information of sobriety to them. The best I don't own the actions of others. The best I can do is lead and model the way.
Very good.
And you know what? They're going to struggle. They may slip and fall. And, you know, I may not be the best friend either. I may not have it is not upon me to martyr myself to be their support system. But what I can do is be present and available when they need, and be wholehearted in the interactions, and be the best Patrick that I can be. As being compassionate and really trying to listen and understand. And sometimes they may not. That means asking questions. That may be, you know, engaging with them. But what it ultimately means is like, everybody at the end of the day wants to be validated. I see you struggling. I see you trying to raise your awareness. And I love you for that. That is not a bad thing. That is going to help you fight, and you'll find your way.
Yeah.
Very nice. I like that.
Well said, Patrick.
Woohoo.
Very, very
High five, bud.
Yeah, high five.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, I think we could talk all day here.
Yeah.
But I think we're gonna wrap it up. And I like what you said, Patrick. We'll definitely do this again. Patrick was supposed to be here live, but he's got, I don't know if you guys have heard of it. Maybe
COVID.
tested. Yeah, it went around for a while, so he's not gonna share it, but he's on the mend.
Yep.
But we'll have him on. We got Emily's gonna be back on by popular demand. Father-in-law Kellen is going to be on. He's going to, we're not going to, no spoilers, he's going to talk about something really cool. Michelle didn't even know about that. She's like, no one told me. That's because it's a surprise, Michelle. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, but I want to say thank you so much to everybody for their support. If this helps you at all, please go out there, like and subscribe. It helps us. If you got any benefit from this, I cannot believe how many people have been subscribing to this channel, how many people have downloaded the podcast. It's awesome out there that people are appreciating what we're doing and allowing us to talk and be a part of their lives. Patrick, this was invaluable. This is our first guest stream, so I'm glad we didn't have any crazy technical issues. Otherwise, you had to run down the street and come over here and help fix everything, but I think we got it dialed in. Join us on the Tuesday night Sober Mind Rewind. Patrick, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and your advice. And it was fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you guys for creating these spaces. These are very important.
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. All right, everyone. Remember, we got the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline out there. Al-Anon to get started if you're looking for a path or a direction to go. Talk to your friends, talk to your family. You're loved. Reach out. Be kind to yourself. Yeah. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.